Mark and Jono from Business and Bare Feet here again. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to talk strategy, business strategy, the big one.
The big S.
You're all shaking in your boots.
The dirty business S word.
Oh, what does it really mean? What's it on about?
Yeah.
You know, you're in business and somebody said, write a business plan. Was it the bank? I don't know. Somebody awful. Business plans.
Worse still, a business coach.
Business coach?
You've got to write a business plan. You've got to have a plan.
Some of those old-fashioned guys still do that, don't they?
Yeah, and they'll charge you a lot of money for it.
Well, yeah. We don't subscribe to that. But strategy...
Oh, we subscribe to charging a lot of money.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I was kidding.
The strategy. We're into strategy. We're into models. We're into thinking, not so much just paper typing.
Actually, I love the word framework.
Framework.
And I use that a lot rather than systemization as well. But if you can develop a framework for your business, so the strategic side, so the vision, the values, why you're doing what you're doing, all those sort of things, that's the big picture stuff that very rarely changes.
Yep.
Okay, so that's where you're going.
The techniques, the tactics, the detail will change over
operational
time.
imperatives, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So it is very difficult in today's world to do a business plan, because the minute you press...
It is competitive.
Well, the minute you press, they say as soon as you do the last period, but the minute you press the print button, it's out of date. And so there are a lot of subscribers out there in terms of the one week business plan or the 1 page plan and all those sorts of things, and they're all good in their own way. But really what we're talking about is that broader strategy.
Yeah, just one level a little bit higher. It's about taking this vision, your values that you're trying to do, this concept of who you're trying to help in the world, and you're trying to create an engine.
Yeah. So we've talked about why in another video. So I encourage you to go back and have a listen to that and some of the show notes around that in terms of start with why and asking yourself the why questions and so forth. So now we're really looking at a little bit of the how.
Yeah, it's a little bit of the how.
Yeah.
As I was just saying, we don't subscribe to writing major business plans.
No.
But doing the thinking, getting the model right is pretty critical. Getting that engine, how are you going to deliver what you want to the community, to your client base? And there are many different ways, particularly in this modern internet-connected world. There are many more business models that didn't exist for most of the last century. Yeah. And it's actually harder.
Yeah.
You might want to write it down on 1 page. You might want to jot lots of ideas around. Ultimately, you've got to focus on the client.
Yeah. So if we have a look at some of the data that people have to gather, some of the information, because there is some stuff that needs to be written down. Okay, so we're not talking about writing a full business plan here, but there are some things that it's good to write down.
If you can summarise it 1 page, fantastic.
Yeah, but I'm talking about in the bigger strategy. Understanding your market, knowing what your competitive market looks like.
You are servicing somebody. You're servicing a type of person.
Yep.
It's a demographic. It's a psychographic. It's a particular community. You're not going to handle the whole world. No business does that anywhere in the world, so why should you?
Yeah.
Again, with the internet, you can target the tiniest of niches, and there are many people all around the world that you can get to.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, we've found that with the whole adventure space in entrepreneurialism, right?
Oh,
you know,
look at it flourish.
We sort of think, oh, there's 2 of us. Is there anyone else out there?
Yeah.
Turns out there is. Yeah. So obviously first we're talking about your client. Okay. Yeah. So a lot of if you go and have a look at the average website, and we've seen this, you go and look at the average website, it's all about what I can do for you. Okay. Me.
Yep.
Whereas very little is about, which generally says to me they don't actually understand their market very well because they don't know what to say to them. And so targeting your market is very important. So who's out there? When you start looking at market segments and so forth, what do I need to do to actually segment my market? Okay, so and we talked about a few things this morning. We were chatting about this. Obviously understanding that the market, first of all, needs to be a market. It's got a boundary. It's an economic need.
There's
a common need. There's a common boundary around them.
There's enough people there.
Yeah, because part of segmenting a market is providing a message for them as well.
Those people have got to have some money.
Yes, they need to have money.
So if they've got no money, there's no financial.
There's not a lot of business done without profit.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's too much business done without profit, but
Oh,
not a lot of successful
And there are other
businesses.
business models. There are other models like charities and NGOs and government and things like this that deal in that space.
We could even talk about them having to make a profit to survive.
Well, they do. It's sustainability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously you need to be able to make money out of your market, and that's really, really important.
Yeah.
And so they'll have a, as I said, they'll have a defined boundary. So they'll have a geographical boundary,
Yep.
maybe a demographic boundary, might have an age, a sex, or whatever it might be.
Language.
Certain language they use.
Yeah.
All sorts of things. So really understanding that, and effectively, it needs to be big enough to actually have a business model.
It does.
So you might have one market, one person that you make $1 million out of, and that's it.
Too risky.
So eventually that $1 million is going to run out.
Yep.
And so it needs to be big enough to make money out of.
Yep.
And
If I go back to my old auditing days, and we were taught that you had to give a black audit mark if the client didn't have more than 17 or 18 customers.
Right.
That was the magic number where risk got evenly shared,
Yeah.
and it wasn't actually reduction. Wasn't that great after?
Well,
as
we've
you got
all
more
been
and
in
more.
businesses where you know, and you might be sitting today in a business thinking, I've got one really big client. If I lose that big client,
Technically, you
there
might
goes
be,
3/4 of my business.
Well, that's self-employment, though, isn't it?
I think so.
It's not
yeah.
really business. It's
Yeah.
not really entrepreneurial.
But a lot of businesses find themselves there. It isn't really entrepreneurial
Yeah.
because you're not spreading yourself out.
No.
But I do like that. That's 17 or 18 clients. I think that's quite clever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you know that you've got a group of people and they're enjoying your service and they're wanting more and you're doing something better than your competitors are doing,
Yeah.
suddenly you've got this level of innovation. Maybe you've even got to the stage of disruption where you're doing something so much better that you start attracting people left, right, and centre.
And the interesting thing is, in that space, you'll find it's somewhere aligned in your why as well. It's really fascinating the way that spills out.
You'll love it.
Which is why it's so important to go back to the first video and understand why you're doing what you're doing, because that really sets apart, you know, where your vision sits, where your values sit, and so I always used to say, you know, in terms of product, you can invent a new product. The Chinese have copied it 3 weeks ago. You know, it's now probably 3 years ago. And but at the same time, there's a whole bunch of other things that sit around that.
It's
that
much
make
more
it so
than
valuable.
just the product.
Correct.
Yeah.
Or the person.
Or the person.
Yeah.
It's much more complex. You know, your competitors might be doing that stuff, but do they have a relationship with your target market like you do?
Yeah.
Who is the most trusted?
Yeah. Yeah. And so understanding where you sit in that space and understanding what your market wants. And this is where we talked about it in another video, the be more interested than interesting.
Yes.
And so in your marketing and in the communication, the stuff you're talking to your client about, to your target, is really about being interested in them.
The language is about somebody else. It's not about you. It's not about Mark or Jono.
Actually, there's a whole business in the US, I love it, that talks about hero-centric, putting the hero, the customer, at the center of your story.
There you go.
And so basically it's much more, it's a fairly common,
Well, some of you will remember Tom Peters, who started writing these wonderful books back in the 80s about customer service and how it can make you a lot more profit.
Not new. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So targeting your market and obviously knowing your customer is going to be a really vital step, and so that will also determine the kind of products you know. Are you a high-end, high profit outcome, or are you more of a low-end, high volume?
So there's three big ones there in this strategy.
Yep.
Who is the customer that you're dealing with?
Yep.
And what is your business model that you're what is the value actually that you're taking to them? And then thirdly, what is the business model? What technique you're using?
So let's jump into the business model.
The business models. Well, the business model is the engine. You know, it could be a 4-cylinder engine, it could be an 8-cylinder engine, it could be a V12. They're all methods of propulsion.
Or it could be a 2.5.
It could be a 3-cylinder rotary. They're all different engines.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, we're not talking about huge financial models and paperwork that goes on for ages and ages. There are some numbers. It has to make a profit, and that's a numbers thing.
Yep.
But it's got the ability where you pour in a little bit of petrol and you get so much more out of it, and that's, in this case, it's propulsion.
Correct.
In a car engine or something like that.
Yeah.
And there are many different models today. I saw a list, in fact, I've got it over there, it's about 54 different business models. That,
well, it'd be good to make something like that available for our community.
We might even drill down and expand that a little bit more for...
well, I mean, we start talking about business models, we've got about 2 years worth of conversations there. So,
but it's interesting. So the model was that third one. The customer group is still the same.
Yeah.
The value proposition is still the same,
Yep.
but how you take it to market is different. And you might be targeting the same group as somebody else. You might be targeting exactly the same value proposition, but your techniques, your model is the one that
Yep.
works the best.
Yep.
And I look at this great example at the moment. There's this massive subscription, online, cloud-based computing world where everybody is renting services on a month-by-month basis.
Mm-hmm.
You remember, it wasn't that long ago we used to buy our accounting package. We used to buy
Software
our
in a box.
Adobe Photoshop. You know, every year or so we would plonk a whole lot of money down. We'd own that copy. Microsoft was the same. You plunked it out. Now we're renting it on a monthly basis.
Mm-hmm.
Huge new business model has developed in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Or it's become so much more popular.
Interestingly enough, that model actually kicked in the late 90s, but particularly in Australia, the internet just wasn't strong enough.
That's right.
The networks weren't strong enough.
Yeah.
So I was involved in one of those companies.
Yeah, way too
yeah,
early.
Application service providers.
Yeah. The fun times.
The fun times, that's right.
The early
when
stages.
When there was lots of money being kicked around.
Yeah. But the foundation building blocks
Yeah.
of a lot of the internet
It just
today.
showed that that's where we were going.
We're in this stage of the technology industry where it is the application of this
Yep.
raw technology.
Yep.
Late 90s, early 2000s, lots of new technology being developed. You know, the whole XML, the soaps and things like this were coming around. All that stuff's done and dusted. It's now applying it
Yep.
in a business sense.
And it's becoming mainstream.
Absolutely.
So rather than it being early adopter. So it's knowing, well, again, that just in that is knowing where your market's at in terms of what you're providing them.
Who is it that you're
So
trying
I
to
think
provide?
back to this software company, and it ended up as a product that ended up back in government and large corporate because small business just wasn't ready to rent software.
Yep.
I assume that's where I actually left before it.
Yep.
It really solidified itself, but it ended up back in that corporate space. But small businesses wasn't ready to buy it. The networks in Australia at that time, you know, we were all on ISDN lines in business, and they just weren't fast enough.
So look at the iPhone. The iPhone with a touchscreen is now, it's not yet 9 years old. It's 8.5 years old. Look at the world's development of mobile applications in
We're kind of
8 years.
Isn't it funny? We're kind of bored of the iPhone now and the whole smartphone thing. It's like, well, so is there actually possible to invent something completely new? But and is there a market for it? So obviously knowing where your market's at in that cycle. So some of you, particularly if you're creating something that's a bit disruptive, will be playing an education game as well.
Yep.
So part of your marketing, part of your targeting of customers is educating them.
And the question then becomes, which one is right? Which one should you do?
Yep.
And the answer is the customers will tell you.
Yeah. Yep.
But magic ingredient, you actually have to ask them.
Yeah.
You have to take it to them.
Now coming back to this, so particularly we're in a space where it's very easy to look at, and I've heard this a lot in the IT industry. I don't have any competitors. Now I have two opinions based on this. One, you haven't looked hard enough. Two, okay, you haven't got any competitors, which means you haven't got a market. But let's talk about most of them are you haven't looked hard enough.
Correct.
Okay, so I look at this a product that might do a whole range of services. Okay, and I go, well, okay, no one does the complete range of services, and that may be true.
It may be.
But if I told someone, this is where you go and talk to your market, you say, okay, well, it does timesheets, for example. Oh, this is a time billing software. Or it manages projects. Oh, it's project management software. No, it's none of those. It's actually something over here. That's just a small part of it. The problem is that the customer makes up their mind what they think it is based on what you tell them.
Correct.
And so this is where the education comes into it, and this is where we found it quite a challenge.
Well, you need to look at the function, because there are other people probably providing that function.
So when you're doing your competitive analysis, which is a very important part of your strategy, because you need to know what your competitors are doing, you need to know how you differentiate with them. When you look at your competitive strategy, you need to look at those areas where people might get you confused with that market.
Yeah.
Because it's actually the perception of the customer.
In your example, you know, you've got all these different features and functions into a application package. Does the customer actually want a whole package? Does it want a one-stop shop?
Yeah,
to
yeah.
do this stuff.
That's another point. Yeah.
Is those one-stop big applications too much these days? It might be that they just want simple things.
Yeah.
So they want this function and they want that function, and they're not worried about the rest of them.
So when we start, just to wrap this up, obviously we're getting close to time. So when we start looking at, we're talking about strategy, and we're talking specifically about your market.
Yes.
This is our foundational series.
Yep.
For entrepreneurs and startup businesses. So we're talking about making sure the market is big enough.
Yep.
There's money to be made in it, and it's defined.
Yep.
We're talking about understanding what competitive market you're playing in.
Yes.
And
Who else
we're
is
talking
providing
about
that function?
Yep. And we're talking about playing an education game as well. You may need to educate your market a little bit around.
The more innovative,
disruptive.
the more innovative and disruptive. Yes,
Yep.
you need to take people on a journey because they won't get it necessarily.
So a couple
straight
of things to think about. This isn't just targeting customers to sell your product, but also when you're targeting for investors as well, because they're going to be thinking like a consumer. Yeah. And so I hope that's been helpful. So that's probably just one little chunk of strategy. In the community, we will go into a lot more strategic work. We've got a whole process that you can work through to develop your strategy and unfold that. So Mark, thanks for another great session.
Indeed. Thanks, Jono.
And we'll talk again soon. Look forward to hearing from you.
See you guys later.
Bye.